have a very distinct memory of my first day of school in the States. I went into school about 2 weeks after I arrived from Ethiopia, and because I didn't know English, my mom would accompany me. And I remember walking down the hall with her on one side and holding a heavy dictionary in one hand. My name is Rep Kalile, and this is my journey of finding home. Now, back in the States, standing at the entrance of the classroom with my mom on one side, instead of being met with a game of jump rope, I walked into a classroom full of students who looked at me with curiosity. In Ethiopia, playing jump rope was a daily routine for me. It was a predictable game I could always count on to incorporate into my day. That is until one of these ordinary days would bring me news that would alter the course of my life. Let me tell you a little bit about my world. I lived in a small, tight-knit neighborhood, and at the center sat a 3-bedroom home. And my nuclear family, my dad, my mom, Samri, and my younger sister, was relatively small, but my community was made up of families, and that was my second home. We shared a rich communal life together, gathering water, attending church, and cooking for the holidays in the same yard. And there was a lot of chatter and laughter as we shared kitchen utensils and gossiped about the community's hairstylist's new braiding prices. Our neighborhood was surrounded by a hilly terrain I would run down to get to school and markets, and there were tall trees that my father and I would often run through, and the greenery was always so luscious from the rainy season that covered half the year. And that was my world. It was small, predictable, and often unexciting. And it was a life whose days repeated with little variation until the day my neighbors came to my school. I was engrossed in my usual game of jump rope with my friends when I noticed 4 of my neighbors walking toward me. And I remember having this inexplainable knowledge about what had happened before they said anything to me. So I dropped the rope and walked up to them, and then I followed them to Samri's class to pick her up. And then we made the walk out of the schoolyard and uphill toward our home. Unbeknownst to me, that would be the last time I would see my school and my friends. Again, on the walk home, Samri and I both had this unexplainable knowledge about what had happened before anyone uttered a word. We just knew. Now, arriving at our home, we were met with a sight that confirmed our unspoken fears. All our neighbors had gathered, dressed in traditional mourning attire, and at the center sat a casket. And this was the moment my world shifted dramatically. And within the span of a few hours, not only had we lost our father, but everything we had ever known. We began to rebuild. We moved 7 hours away to my grandma's home, and here we attended a new school and got close to the community, but that was until my mom was no longer able to take care of us, and me and my younger sister entered the adoption process. Samri, who was too old for adoption, had to stay behind. And again, I began to rebuild. So at this first orphanage, I attended a new school, and the nannies became like family. But that, too, was temporary, and after some months, we were transferred to a second orphanage. And here, the reality of being adopted started to truly sink in. Each time I scrambled to rebuild my world, only for it to quickly change, I came to believe constant instability and loss to be expected from life. It's all I knew. At the second orphanage, I started to see other kids leaving with their adoptive families, and not long after, mine came to visit. And I couldn't help but feel excitement at the prospect of seeing America and belonging to a family that had so much love to offer. But the excitement was not without its counterpart, and the thought of losing my mom and my sister felt like yet another loss I wasn't prepared to handle. Despite my fear and resistance, me and my younger sister were adopted. And once again, at the age of 10, I began to rebuild. One of my favorite memories about arriving in the States is meeting my siblings for the first time. I remember seeing them jumping up and down on the front lawn full of joy and excitement. And there were a lot of culture shocks on my arrival. The abundance was astounding to me. The ease with which people accessed clothes, food, and parks was all a new experience. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to find my footing in this new environment. The memories of my first year here are hazy, obscured by a lot of trauma and overwhelming change, but certain moments stand out. I remember being pulled out of class to learn English with my ESL teachers. And I remember our class trips to the library where I discovered a love for reading and books. Within 6 months, I learned to speak English fluently, but just as quickly, I lost my native language. Going into middle school, in addition to the loss and overwhelming change, I started to struggle with my identity and different cultures. My outward blackness and inward whiteness and my Ethiopian background created this unique identity that made it hard to fit in. And my abandonment issues that arose from loss at a young age made it hard to accept love and help. And my struggle with what I had lost and the expectation that I was to make this new place my new world made it hard to relate to my adoptive parents. And all of this started to weigh on my mental health. And despite being in therapy, there were many times when I didn't want to live. Leaving this complicated life behind seemed like the only way to find rest and peace from the pain I felt. Now, going into high school, I decided it was time to fix things, so I befriended a diverse group of people, hoping I would find a sense of belonging. But I ended up feeling more lost than before. By my senior year of high school, I started to think about reconnecting with my Ethiopian roots and family. I felt this was where the healing would take place. I would go back, reconnect, find my family, and all those years of sadness, the trauma, and the pain would be fixed. Going into college, I started to look for contact information, but because it was a closed adoption, that was difficult to do. Thankfully, for a dear friend who often visited Ethiopia, she was able to get me Samri's phone number. With this information in hand, I gathered up the courage and made the first call. The reconnection via video call was overwhelmingly emotional, and for the first 5 minutes, all we could do was stare at each other through tear-filled eyes. And once we gathered our voices, we shared news of our world, the past 10 years, and random details that came to our minds, but mostly we cried. One of the hardest things about reconnecting after so many years is finding out news you're not prepared to hear, and for me, that was the death of my grandmother. It was a moment of sadness and heartbreak amidst so much joy. As I spoke with more family members, I decided I would visit the following summer. The early morning departure is vivid in my brain. I left 3 a.m. in the morning, and after getting in the plane, I sought refuge in sleep, drifting in and out of consciousness. And in my waking moments, I observed people traveling together, and their togetherness reminded me of my loneliness on the trip. After landing, I gathered my bags, and my eyes darted around the crowded airport, looking for Samri until I saw her doing the same from a distance, and I immediately dropped all my bags and ran into her arms. 10 years of separation melted away in that embrace. 10 years from the only person who understood my life and my experiences living in Ethiopia. The reunion with the rest of my family was very emotional. The joy of seeing my mom, my old neighborhood, and small memories I had thought about the past 10 years, like eating sugar cane. But the unexpected disconnection. My clothes, my needs, my routines all seemed foreign to them, and I felt the stark contrast between who I had become and the person they remembered me to be. It turns out they were right. I had changed significantly in my decade living in America. Walking through my old neighborhood, the once familiar sights and sounds and smells now felt distant. The hilly terrain I once ran down to get to school was now populated by people going to markets, speaking a language I no longer understood. And the tall trees my father and I once ran through were populated by newly built homes I didn't recognize. And I watched my mom cook on a small fire using coal and felt a pang of guilt at the realization that I no longer fit seamlessly into this world I used to call my own. Being alone on this trip was incredibly hard for me, and by the time I got back, as thankful as I was for the reconnection and seeing my family, I was drained and felt more lost than before. I had imagined this to be a trip where I would come back fully healed. I had imagined coming back and making everything right. But instead, I came back with more struggles and new questions. How do I continue to become a college student and find my passion for the future? How do I build a relationship with both of my families, both my worlds? I wished for a simpler life. I wish I could say that these struggles were in the past, and here I am standing before you having fought the fight and standing in victory, but the truth is I'm still fighting, and I'm still rebuilding my world. Truth is, adoption didn't fix what I lost, and reconnecting didn't either. But I have learned to let people come into my life, trusting they won't abandon me, and I've learned to let myself be parts of a community where I don't fully fit in. And I've learned to love parts of myself and my story that I can't find in others. To love the little girl running down the hill, excited to play jump rope with her friends. To love the girl who bravely went to school, dictionary in hand, in a foreign country. To love the girl sitting on a subway train in DC on her way to her first day of her internship. I've learned to love my identity. And to those of you who feel alone in this world, who struggle to find your place, who struggle to heal, I want you to know you're not alone. The path isn't linear, but you can learn to embrace the challenges ahead by carrying the strengths of your past and the hope of what lies ahead. Thank you.